So, have you ever wondered how your favorite app just seems to know what everyone's complaining about? Or how a big brand can figure out, like, instantly how people feel about a new product launch? Well, it's not magic. It's something called sentiment analysis. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and see exactly how computers are learning to understand our emotions, turning all that messy human text into some really clear insights. Okay, so here's our game plan. First up, we'll nail down what sentiment analysis actually is. Then, we're going to get our hands dirty and look at how the data gets prepped for analysis. After that, we'll dive into how computers actually measure mood. And finally, we'll see how it all comes together in one final score. It's a pretty cool process, so let's get into it. Which, brings us to the biggest question of all, right? How in the world do you teach a machine, a thing of just pure logic and code, to understand something as messy and, well, as human as emotion? That's the huge puzzle we're going to piece together today.
All right, so first things first, what even is sentiment analysis? At its heart, the whole idea is to take a giant jumble of words and turn it all into structured, meaningful data. You can really think of it as a two-step dance. First, the computer has to comb through all the text and just find the opinions. Then, once it has an opinion, it has to figure out the writer's attitude. Are they happy? Are they upset? Or are they just kind of neutral, just stating a fact? It's all about finding the feeling that's hiding inside the words. Now, before we can even think about finding those feelings, we have to deal with the raw material. And that brings us to what is, honestly, the most critical and definitely the messiest part of the whole job: preparing the data. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. I mean, think of it like you're cooking. You wouldn't just grab vegetables from the garden and start chopping them for a salad without washing them first, right? Of course not. The very same idea applies here. If you analyze messy, raw data, you're just gonna get messy, useless results. You have to clean it up first. Now take a look at this. To you and me, this sentence looks completely normal. This is just how people talk online. But to a computer, oh man, this is an absolute nightmare. You've got everything: slang, stretched out words, hashtags, tons of punctuation, even emoticons. How is a machine supposed to make any sense of that? Well, the answer is a really systematic cleanup process. First step, get rid of all the noise. That means all the extra punctuation, any website links, the hashtags, gone. Step 2, normalize the text. That's just a fancy way of saying make everything lowercase so that love with a capital L and love with a lowercase l are treated as the same word. Step 3 is super important. We take out what are called stop words. These are all those common little words like the, is, or that don't really carry any emotional weight. And finally, we do something called stemming or lemmatization, which just means we reduce words to their root form. So words like loving or loved all get boiled down to their core idea: love. And here's the result of all that work. Just look at the difference. We went from that chaotic, messy bit of human speak to this clean, simple string of keywords. Now, this is something a computer can finally work with. All the important words that carry the actual sentiment are there, and all the extra junk is gone. Okay, so our text is all clean. Now we get to the really fascinating part. How do we actually measure the mood? How do we put a number on that feeling? The big idea here is actually pretty simple. We use a predefined dictionary. It's often called a lexicon, where thousands of words have already been assigned a score. Positive words get positive scores, and negative words, well, they get negative ones. We are essentially turning language into a math problem. And this is mostly done using two key metrics. First, you have polarity. This one's pretty straightforward. It just measures if a word is positive, negative, or neutral. So in our dictionary, love might get a +1, while problem gets a -1. But just as important is the second one, subjectivity. This asks a totally different question. Is this text an opinion, or is it just a fact? This helps the system ignore purely factual statements and focus on what people actually feel. So we've cleaned up our text, we've given scores to all the important words. Now it's time for the final step, putting it all together to calculate that final score. And this is the payoff. The system just adds up all the positive scores and all the negative scores from our clean text, and it generates a simple at-a-glance summary. So in our original example, words like love and best would give us positive points, while drain and problem would give us negative points. The final result is a clear picture, kind of like this bar chart, which shows a review that's mostly positive, but has a pretty significant chunk of negative feedback too. And this is why it all matters so much.
This final score is not just a number, it's an incredibly powerful tool. For a business, this is instant insight from thousands of customer reviews. For a political campaign, it's like a real-time poll of public opinion. It takes this huge, messy sea of text and transforms it into a simple, understandable metric.
And all of this leaves us with a final, pretty big question to think about. We've seen how all this is done, but it brings up a much bigger idea. If we can successfully teach machines to read and quantify our emotions, what are the rules for how they should use that knowledge? It's definitely something to chew on.